Poised for Exit is a show for business owners who want to achieve a successful exit based on their own terms. Your business exit will likely be the biggest financial transaction of your life, and for most, you'll have one shot at doing it right. The topics and guests we feature and the stories they share will provide valuable ideas and strategies to improve operations and grow enterprise value so you can achieve the best possible exit outcome. Now here's your host, award-winning certified exit planning advisor, Julie Keys.
Welcome, everyone, to the Poised for Exit podcast show. Today's experts are seasoned CPA professionals who are going to cover the topic of R&D credits and how owners can use them to their advantage. This topic is being covered by request. We appreciate it when our listeners suggest new topics, so please keep them coming. We're going to be right back after these important messages, so stay with us.
Thinking about selling your business in the next few years? Don't wait to start planning. I've seen too many business owners wait too long and regret it. Freedom Financial Partners are financial advisors who specialize in exit planning for business owners, helping you reduce tax surprises, protect what you've built, and quantify how much you need from the sale. Their proven process helps you think beyond your business so you can move forward with clarity and confidence. The longer you wait, the fewer options you may have. Download your free financial readiness assessment today at ffpforme.com/exit. That's ffpforme.com/exit.
This is Andy Kosumba, president of Calhoun Companies. We understand that selling your business is a big deal. Since 1908, Calhoun Companies has been confidently connecting buyers and sellers. From small family shops to large corporations, our expert brokers walk with you and guide you every step of the way, whether you're looking to retire or simply for a fresh start. If you're curious what your business could sell for, or if you're ready to start the process, head to calhouncompanies.com for a free and confidential consultation. Calhoun Companies, the confident choice for buyers and sellers.
My name is Todd Grau, and I'm the president of the Twin Cities Exit Planning Chapter. If you're a business owner and advisor and want to learn more about the world of exit planning, you're invited to visit the Twin Cities chapter of the Exit Planning Institute. You can expect top-level education delivered by subject matter experts at every monthly meeting. Grow your network and draw from the learning that could be a game changer for your business or your practice. There's no pressure to become a member, so come and see what the buzz is all about. Our meetings are held the second Wednesday of the month, 7:30 to 9 a.m. See the show notes for more information and registration links.
Exiting your business is a big deal, both financially and emotionally. I'm John Marquet, certified exit planning advisor with TrustPoint. We help business owners transition smoothly on their terms. Our focus is on maximizing value, minimizing stress, and giving you confidence in what's next. Whether you're selling or passing the torch, we make the process seamless. Start planning today at trustpointinc.com. That's trustpointinc.com.
Hello, Poised for Exit listeners. We are here today with John Ammann and Tim Urban, who are CPAs with John A. Knutson and Company. Gentlemen, welcome to Poised for Exit. So glad to have you.
Thank you, Julie. We appreciate the opportunity to share with you our information.
Yeah, and we're talking about that hot topic that's come up a couple times with our listeners that they really want to hear more about R&D credits and how they work. And so we're just going to dive in, okay? First of all, let's just start with the basics. Tell us about what is an R&D credit.
Well, thank you, Julie. The R&D tax credit it's a federal incentive that gives businesses money back for creating new products, improving existing products, or enhancing processes or technology. One misnomer that you could think about with the R&D credits, most people think it's the large company, the 3Ms, the Medtronics of the world, creating advanced new ideas, processes, improvements. But the thing to emphasize is that it's not just for scientists, it's an everyday business innovation. So Tim, do you want to talk about what type of companies qualify for the credit?
Yes. So manufacturers qualify, software developers, engineering companies, firms, construction companies, food and beverage. If you're in that industry, you could qualify. Medical devices, certain startup, technology companies. So really a, very wide variety of companies can qualify. It's really not the industry, it's kind of what you're doing that determines if you'd qualify.
So not just industry, but also size too, because you mentioned that there's a misnomer that a lot of we out in society believe, well, it's just the big companies, the ones, right, that qualify for the R&D, but that's not necessarily so either, right?
That is correct, Julie. We've got various clients that we have worked with, from the startup companies to $1 billion manufacturer. Basically, what you're looking at is what are they doing? What is new? And it's really not new to potentially the world. It's
Sure.
really kind of new to you as well that you have to look at. So
Good point.
a manufacturer could be developing a new way to manufacture a product within their own business line that potentially would qualify for the R&D credit. Or if you're, let's say, a wholesaler, like one of my clients that was developing an app, which was totally new to them. They've never designed or made an app for their product, but it was new to them. And so they incurred engineering costs. They did a lot of in-house research and developed the application, and those R&D costs were eligible for claiming this credit.
Like one of your competitors could be using a certain, technology or process, and maybe in
Yeah.
the past you haven't used that certain process technology, and you kind of internally develop that. So you could potentially qualify. So even though it's not new to the world, it's new to you, to go along with
Right.
what John was saying.
Yeah, I like that distinction. I think that's really important because, that could be another misnomer. Well, this has been around for a while and we haven't taken advantage of it. So, we probably don't qualify because it's been around with our competition, and that isn't necessarily the case. What about AI? Let's talk about AI investments and how does that qualify? I know before the show started, we were talking about startups being able to use this too. So that's kind of another part of the conversation, but I wanted to make sure we didn't miss that.
When we are looking at the AI, AI is the new hot button topic for every discussion that everyone's having these days.
Mm.
One thing that you want to be careful about when you're trying to claim the R&D credit related to AI is that if you're using out of the box software, let's say you're using ChatGPT, any of the other main AI bots out there, and all you're doing is creating agents, that in itself doesn't really lend itself to creating an R&D credit. Now, if you're basically doing the engineering, you're basically creating kind of an overlay for that AI, and I'm not an expert in AI design or whatnot, but
Mhm.
anytime you're starting to use more of a technological advancement versus just an out of the box processing, the way I think of it is, let's say you buy a software out of the box that's going to help ChatGPT, OpenAI, basic development.
Sure.
Now, that basic development is not going to rise to the level of being technological in nature. It's not going to be engineering researched by itself.
Hmm.
It's you're looking at, you have to really have that process of experimentation and design, and it has to have a permitted purpose, and it has to be based around science versus just kind of a plug and play, make a few tweaks to meet your needs. I don't know if that helps clarify.
Yeah, it does help. Like we were talking about before the show, the firms that are out there that are creating custom applications for their clients or for themselves. This should be like part of the value proposition, right? Like you're spending a lot of money on this development, on this closed system development, which of course is custom and it applies only to what you do for your work. That seems to me that would be an application for sure for an
You're
R&D.
100% right, Julie. As long as you're furthering that research, you're furthering that process, and it's not just plug and play. Like
Right.
if like for example, if I hire you and you were doing my AI build out, whatnot, and I'm paying you a fixed fee, and you're basically going to give me a product that works, that cost in itself isn't going to be eligible for R&D because you really have to have uh, a research product or a process that's eliminating uncertainty. So if
Yes.
I just pay someone and it's basically I'm getting a guaranteed project, if there's
Hmm.
no risk of loss,
Hmm.
then it's really hard to claim that those R&D costs are
Sure.
eligible. Because really what the R&D credit is around is further developing a product or process and
Yeah.
solving an uncertainty and solving a problem. And in most of those cases, when you're doing that, you're incurring all these costs, and it's not necessarily profitable on the front end. So the government and whatnot decided to give us a credit to help offset that innovation. So Long story short is that if you have really no risk of loss with regards to your development of your product or your process, you're generally not going to have a R&D credit associated with it. There has to be a certain amount of risk of loss.
Sure.
Otherwise, there are numerous cases that the IRS and the government have brought forward saying that you weren't at risk of loss. The product itself was a certain. So if you're getting paid for whether it works or not, that's potentially going to not, that's going to be not eligible for the R&D credit.
Sure. So let's talk about these specialty companies that are out there. We were talking about that briefly before the show. I have been introduced or heard of some of the specialty companies out there that tout themselves as we're R&D specialists. We can get you, lots of credits and right. And our process is simple, things like that. And then there's others who are taking a very deep dive, very methodical process that would seem to me to be more legitimate. But let's talk about them and what you've heard and what you know. Like, what are some of the things that the listeners should be watching out for?
Okay. Well, that's a really good point. A lot of CPA firms, especially mid to larger firms, and
Mm-hmm.
even the big four, they have their own departments that will do the credits.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at those third-party specialist firms out there, I won't name any names because you can all Google those names. But I think what you'd look at is that firm just selling a credit so that way they can get 20 to 30% of the credit. Because a lot of firms out there these days they're taking a percentage of the credit. CPA firms typically can't do that. That's not allowed in our industry. So these credit firms that are out there, they say, well, I'll take a 30-year credit. And so they have an incentive to obviously inflate that credit potentially. So I think what you look at is you look at larger firms that do the detailed analysis. So some firms, when they go out and do R&D studies, they're just basically going to go out and look at, okay, what employees spent the X number of hours doing, because it's really wage based for most of the population out there. It's pretty much wage based. Unless you're one of the big players, 3M, Medtronic, then you're going to have prototyping, design, General Mills. They're going to have all that extra cost. But generally, most firms or most clients out there are going to be tied to labor. So if the third party specialist firm comes in and just says, okay, give me a list of your employees, you just tell me how they're doing R&D and what percentage of their time is R&D, and they're just going to take that and use that as a baseline for calculating their R&D without doing any other inquiries, documentation. That's where you're going to have issues with those third-party firms. And the large players out there aren't going to be doing that. So I
Right.
think if you were to Google the large R&D specialist firms, you're going to get a pretty good list. And then it's a matter of just talking to them. What's your process? How do you calculate the R&D? What protections do I have with you? Like most CPA firms that are out there will not do audit protection within the engagement. Usually that's going to be a separate fee. Some of these third-party specialist firms will give audit protection to a number of hours or unlimited, depending on what the contract is. And so that would be one reason to potentially hire a third-party specialist firm, is if you are looking at maybe a little higher risk than what your CPA or what is maybe comfortable with. And maybe you don't have the exact documentation and you're worried about claiming that credit. Maybe you're still eligible for it, but your risk of documenting that credit is higher, then maybe you look to a third party firm and maybe they help you build that out. Because if you go to your CPA or your tax professional, they're more than likely going to do that detailed work. And usually a lot of it's going to be hindsight because most clients don't reach out to their CPAs until after the fact.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
so they're going to be reactive. And so we're going to be building up this file to help to calculate that credit.
Sure.
And that's going to cost time, right? And
Of
typically
course.
firms are charging by their hours.
Yeah, that kind of leads me to my next question, actually. Like, how do you qualify? What's the documentation and what does it typically cost?
To qualify for the credits, the IRS has a four-part test, and you got to pass all four parts. And the four parts are permitted purpose, And I'll go into each individually, but the
Yeah,
four
good.
are permitted purpose, technological in nature, the elimination of uncertainty with your research, process of experimentation is the fourth part. So permitted purpose, that's the first one. The research project must create a new or improved business component, such as a new product, process, software, a formula, technique, and your goal has to be to enhance the functionality, performance, reliability, or quality of this product or process. It has to be more than just making cosmetic or aesthetic changes. You really have to try to improve the the functionality performance.
Sure.
And then test two, technological in nature. The research must fundamentally rely on hard sciences such as engineering, computer science, biological science, physical science. It
You mean a
can
hunch won't work? We can't just like take a wild guess? Like this is gonna make, yeah.
No, unfortunately not.
I know, I'm kidding.
The researches can't be based on market research, social sciences.
Sure.
It actually has to be hard science.
Got it.
Test three, elimination of uncertainty. I guess at the start of the project, there must be technical uncertainty regarding the project's capability, and there must be a method to achieve the goal of,
Okay.
making the product feasible.
Let me ask a question about that first before I go to the next one, Tim. So are you saying that if a company builds something that it has to be past the pilot stage? It's got to be like launched and everyone in the company is using it? Or like when does this apply? At what point of the timeline?
If you're starting if there's something that the company needs, a product, a process, they want to develop a new product, they want a new
Mhm.
process, and they think there potentially are better options, it starts from the beginning. Right from the beginning, they
Okay.
can start looking at the costs that they kind of accrue throughout the research stage.
Okay.
And the product, it doesn't have to be successful. The product or process, even if
Okay.
it's not successful, you still potentially have an R&D credit. So I know that's kind of one of the myths. People think like, oh, I start this project, it's unsuccessful, so I don't qualify for the credits. Even if the product doesn't work out and you're doing research, you can still qualify for this credits.
So Tim, to expand on that a little bit, that failure is actually kind of key too, because
Totally.
especially when you're designing a new product, when you can show those steps of where it's failed and how you basically corrected those failures,
Right.
an end product through prototyping,
That's what I
that
was going to
really
say.
does
Yep.
help substantiate that R&D credit versus just a plug and play. If you knew it was going to work from the get-go,
Mhm.
really, how is it R&D related?
Exactly.
That risk of loss that we talked about.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fourth step is process of experimentation. You must use kind of a systematic process where you're going to, look at alternatives to, develop this product, this process. This typically would involve modeling, simulations, prototypes.
Okay.
You're just kind of trial and error, kind of look
Yeah.
at different options and
So I kind of jumped the gun there on that number 4 because I was actually asking you that before you brought that up when I said
yeah.
about pilots. Okay. Yeah. All right.
So you got to pass all four of those tests, as far as your research to qualify for the credits.
I'm sure that over the years, because you guys have a specialty in this category at your firm, Johnny Knutson and Company, one of my favorite CPA firms, I'm guessing that you've got some good client examples and stories that you could share. So maybe
Yeah, Julie, I've got a few that I can
straight
share
through.
with you.
That'd be
So
great.
one of my clients was, and it's a no-brainer, that they're an aerospace engineering company. They do work for NASA. And so when they came to us, they weren't claiming the research and development credit. And so we started talking to them, okay, well, what are you guys doing? And for them, they didn't really have a physical product, but they're doing a lot of papers and mathematical calculations, basically how something's gonna, like a robot's gonna, how it's gonna move on the moon, right? So that research and development that they've done through mathematical calculations, and aerospace engineering is way above my pay grade, but through the work that they were doing, we were be able to capture the wages that he had hired employees that were doing a lot of the research. He was the head PhD, so he's kind of managing the whole process. And then they also did do some contract research as well, which still qualified, maybe not at the full level that normal wages would qualify, but you can still hire out qualified research to be eligible. Now, the big issue that people need to realize is that it's got to be US based. If you start doing foreign research, that's really not going to get you into the credit scenario. So it's really US based research, US wages, contract wages, or contract labor that you're paying in the US. So this aerospace engineering firm, they were smaller, little piece of NASA. They were able to claim anywhere between $50,000 and $100,000 of R&D credits, and for them, that was kind of huge. So
Yeah. What about startups? You mentioned that earlier, that it applies to startups too. And I wonder how many startups out there didn't take advantage of that, even though they could have. You were particularly citing payroll taxes.
Yes, yep, that's correct. Startups, they can, apply for the credits, and there's a special provision for startups where if they have gross revenue of less than $5 million, they've been, around for less than 5 years, I guess 5 years of revenue history, and they can take up to $500,000 of the credit against their payroll tax. So there are special provisions because obviously it's a credit, so you need to have, tax, and then the credit reduces
Right.
your tax. But if you don't have tax, income tax, then you can apply it against your payroll taxes. Also if you wouldn't, have tax, you can carry the credit forward. You can carry it back 1 year, carry it forward 20 years. So there are, ways to, benefit from the credit even if you don't have owe tax the first year.
Okay, I was going to just ask that if you could go back, like how far, like say for instance, when you have to amend your taxes for whatever reason, is that same process applicable, or did you say it's just the 1 year for this?
You can, so basically if in let's say 2025, you have a credit, you
Mhm.
can go back 1 year and you could apply that against income tax in the prior year,
Okay.
or you can carry it forward up to 20 years.
Yeah, what about just the overall
Oh,
application for
oh,
R&D credits, right? Like say for instance, like, oh, this applied and I didn't actually utilize that, right? So
okay.
I need to amend. That's what I was referring to, sorry.
Yep, yep. Typically, you can go back 3 years and amend
Okay,
it.
same thing as, okay, got it. That's good to know. That is good to know. So I'm wondering about like some of the other myths. You mentioned that there were some myths about R&D credits, and you kind of alluded to some at the beginning, but are there any others, any situations that you've come across with clients or maybe people that wanted to be clients, where they thought they qualified and they didn't, or they did qualify and didn't think they did, or however that might roll out? I'm sure that there's lots of that stuff going out around there.
So I think the biggest challenge is what activities are actually qualifying and what activities don't qualify. There's no real bright line tests, but like Tim alluded to earlier, you really kind of have to look at that 4-part test. And if you're meeting that 4-part test, you're
Hmm.
probably going to be able to qualify as long as that 4-part test is met.
Sure.
But if you're just doing basic market research,
Yeah.
sales to customer support, routine quality controls, you're having no risk of loss, and you're just maybe reverse engineering without experimentation. Those types of costs are not going to be eligible for the credit. One, I don't know if I would call it a myth, but there is some concern, like you mentioned, amending R&D, amending returns. When you do amend a return, typically it's not a hot button issue with the IRS to amend returns. But being that the research and development credit is a credit that's basically coming out of the government's coffers, there
Hmm.
is a lot of abuse that does happen there.
Hmm.
So amending a return doesn't necessarily put you in that higher review bucket of the IRS, but it will definitely raise your attention. And
Sure.
because of it being a tier one issue with the IRS, the R&D credit is a tier one issue. So, which doesn't mean you shouldn't claim the credit if you're eligible. It just means you got to make sure you document it. Document why you qualify, how you
Of
qualify.
course. Yeah. Kind of a no-brainer there, right? Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's amazing that sometimes people, the things that they think they can get away with, right? When it would be common sense to us. But yeah, so I'm glad that you spelled that out. This has been a great topic. I'm really super glad that we were able to cover it. Thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge and your experiences. And we can certainly expand on this depending on what our listeners want. So, listeners, you have to let us know what you want to hear about. I'm going to bring those experts to you like we do every single week. Tim and John, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And thank you to our listeners and our sponsors. Join us again next time.